Okay. And we were just here with Google AI Studio. Um, we didn't have as much time today, but here's some quick notes on the the settings, what you can do, why you can use why it matters and things like that. There's section 4. I think what we will do for today is we'll go through all the slides. These are more limitations. We might skip the example that we had left over. But I want to make these things clear because even though we have all these tools, customization and workflows, they're still important, and agents are next. And there's plenty of information that we probably need to catch up on because this moves so fast. By next year, it will be a completely different landscape. The workshop today is kind of trying to get everyone up to speed on what is out there, or at least the basic tools. But we need to take action on how to gear up and maybe like 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out, what we should know and how to get there. Any questions before we move forward?
Have the workshops every 6 months.
I guess Paul's responsible for that.
That comment is noted. Absolutely.
So going back to section 1, we saw that custom GPTs were actually very consistent. In my experience, they're good enough to get majority of the work done, but there's still constraint, and that's because they have limitations such as only being able to have 20 resources for custom GPTs. There's some strengths, but if we want something more expansive, we need to look at other techniques. This is where you'll probably need either a new system to come out or someone with a little bit of development skills to start helping you. And that's where RAG comes along. RAG is Retrieval-Augmented Generation. It solves a couple of these issues. So how RAG works is that think of it as a database, and your LLM is your research assistant. Your research assistant is then able to reference your database, and this can be gigabytes. I've seen a RAG system that was roughly 127 gigabytes of data, and it was able to go in there, search for the correct information, provide it back to them. That's not currently available for all the LLMs that you see online, but that is a use case that does exist in the real world. Maybe not 128 gigabytes of data, but you might have 10 gigabytes of internal documents that you need to be aware of. You can think about financial firms, government offices and things like that. This information can't be online. You can't upload it. It needs to stay there. So you will use either a BAA or a local LLM, create a RAG, so this external database, so it can retrieve the information for you. Not only is it able to extend the amount of data that it has, but also provide transparency and citations, as we saw with Google Research and all the LLM tools. These are just things that you can use right now. So Llama Index Cloud is available if you want to create online RAG systems. You do need to know a little bit about tech and a little bit about networking to create them, but it is something that's currently available, and you use meta models for Llama Index. This is a quick diagram of how RAG works. As I said before, the prompt comes in, the query goes out, it searches the relevant information, it provides it back to a large language model, and the large language model then synthesizes the information, provides it to you. It's very similar to how uploading documents work or custom GPT, just in a less limited fashion. And I think one use case that I've worked on this specifically is so I work for an IT department here. It's ARC, Advanced Research Computing, and we have a huge problem, and it's our documentation. Our documentation is one, we don't have access to edit it because that's up to IT, the department as a whole, to make edits. So if we submit requests, they likely will block them because they don't deem it as necessary. Two, it's that some of it was old and it's located in different places. So if, say, a customer wants to have access to something or is looking for the correct demo or document, I need to be able to pull this. So what I did was I created this right here. It's the ARC support chat, GPT. And this has been great for students that I work with in SI. They're able to ask questions, get responses. So if we say something like, here's some of the starter questions, how do I submit a job in the ARC cluster? It will work like a RAG, remember, but this is limited. And it'll provide me script using our internal knowledge. And it'll provide this step by step. And it can provide resources. So the open on demand link, here's the guide, so on. The issue is that it is not all the links work. This one does. This is the correct guide. But again, it's an issue because we don't have the support to have something like this internally. So I went out my way and just created this. And this helps not only me out, but other students who are looking for answers or are working at 2 a.m. trying to submit a job and they can't figure out why. So it can provide you with any documentation or any type of command. So if you say something like, what is the command for seeing if my GPU is working, which is a question I used to get maybe a couple of times a week. In the cluster, yeah. Yeah, I mean that would be great. And that's where I think agents should go eventually on our cluster to help people out. But at least for the time being, this is not internal knowledge, but it knows enough about our computer architecture and our servers that it says, okay, so it knows that we use NVIDIA GPUs at the university, provides me the correct command, tells me where to run it from an interactive job, or it might be from a batch job, so on. So this is super helpful, but again, it's limited in the way that it can only take 20 documents or 500 megabytes of data, which is quite a bit. It's great because it's a custom GPT. I could share it. However, another thing that it's limited by is that it only has access to public facing information. All of the information about our networks and how things were set up, what teams are responsible for what, our internal documentation. So if we wanted to use this as not a client facing, but rather a internal facing GPT, we could not do that. We can't add more information to it. It's private data. And we would need to create something like a RAG, which is something that we're currently working on. So let's head back to the presentation. So RAG can be very helpful, again, because we can expand on custom GPTs, and it can be local, it could be private. There's places where RAG still fails, and that's because it's simply retrieving information. It does not have the ability to think or to make connections. So it can't really understand the flow of how things work and they interact. It's just retrieving information for you. So it's just like a smart search, right? And also, yeah, it can't connect to entities. So this is where agents will come along. Ideally, you could say something like, I'm trying to submit this job, and just click on the folder, and an agent will be able to grab your code, create that script, allocate the resources for you, depending on how much data and what algorithms you're running, and just submit it. And it would be easy peasy, but that's an agent's work, and we have yet to develop that. Another way where we could circumvent the issue of not being able to create relations or networks is by creating a knowledge graph. So this is like RAG plus, right? So it's just an additional layer that you could have. This is the architecture behind it. Possibly the most popular software for this is Neo4j. It's linked down at the bottom. We won't go too into depth of this, but just know that if we are looking for something above retrieving documents and we want to create relationships and understand these, provide them back to the people, then we go with something like this. We will be skipping this quick, I would say, quick tutorial again of Notebook LM, just because we're running short on time. But just know that Notebook LM can work almost like a pseudo network graph at times, although it can't realistically infer new solutions or networks. If you use the thinking model under it, it can sometimes make these connections, which is surprising. It wasn't always like this, but recently this was the change with Gemini 2.5 Pro. So it's something to be aware of. But again, just like custom GPTs, it can be limited by the amount of data. In this case, like 50 research documents. Now, using the correct approach, this is just a graph for everyone to reference in case you have a use case. So if it's very simple and structured, you can use a custom GPT. If you want to go beyond that, you could create a RAG to retrieve multiple amounts of information. Google LLM, you could use it for synthesizing across multiple different things. You could also use it to search. Knowledge grabs, you need connections, you need diagrams, you need networks, then you need a knowledge graph. By the way, if you've ever been curious on how Facebook or other entities are able to recommend things for you before you even, search for them, for purchasing, right? This is how they do it, because data brokers sell your data all the way online, everywhere. They collect all the data and they're able to connect it to a knowledge graph, and they use an LLM and different architectures to build a profile about you and what likely you are going to Google next or search or something tangent. Lastly, if you need to go beyond simple information gathering and you want to create actions, then agents and MCPs is the way to go. Very quickly, we can just brace through this. Agents, what makes them different? Agents act semi-autonomously. You can chain actions, you can chain multiple agent actions together to create workflows. You can just let them do their thing and not have to worry about anything. They can perform multi-step reasoning, tool use, or goal-oriented behaviors. If your outcome or the expected outcome is not something that is predictable or it can often change, this is also why agents are great, because they are capable of doing some decision making. if we were to think about this for Arc's case, custom GPT is great for Arc support. RAG will be for our doc assistant. So when we're looking at beyond the public facing, knowledge graph will be great for understanding infrastructure inside of Arc, and agents for operations. So like submitting scripts, like managing any type of repetitive work, like, or even monitoring how much usage an account is having, how they can reduce or optimize for cost and things like that. An agent would be the correct way to go. I think we can skip over this one. So common pitfalls of agents. So number one, runaway loops. That's why you need to have terminating conditions. If you don't have terminating conditions, an agent will just keep trying and keep trying. It does not burn out like people. It will just keep going. So you need to be able to monitor them. You need to be able to have conditions that if it tries to do something more than 12 times and it fails, then to just kill itself or stop, whatever it might be. Another thing is hallucinations, right? We briefly spoke about hallucinations. The great thing about agents is that you are now aware that temperature, seed, top K, and top P exist, and agents all work through APIs. So please always set these to whatever you might need them to be. Overreach, if you don't restrict them to a specific environment, they will use everything that's available to them, right? So just make sure you restrict them. There's also latency and cost scaling. So depending if you are local or if you're cloud-based, this can vary. Lastly, it's extremely hard to debug them unless you have another agent that's watching them do all their work, and then that agent reports what it's doing. Then, you know, it can be very difficult to find out why it's doing something incorrectly. And that's why MCPs were created. So MCPs are protocols that you need to follow. It's model context protocols, and it standardizes how these agents can be built. I've provided resources here. If you're interested in learning about them, I highly recommend Anthropic's blog post. This one pretty viral when it first came out. And this explains how you can build these agent systems with multiple different steps and how you can make them productive so you don't run into all of these common pitfalls. Any questions?
And follow these blog posts regularly. Are they sort of the place where new developments come from?
Yeah, so Anthropic has a blog post on their website. So does OpenAI. And I think Gemini has one, but I can't keep up with the Gemini one. There's just a lot going on. But I would say if you're interested on automating, and you could only follow one blog post, I would follow Anthropic's, because it seems like their main focus is just agents, automation, smart work, programming, scientific measurements, and things like that. Anything on chat? Any questions? No? Okay. So I guess we lightly spoke on this, and it is the last section of all this dense information. So we need to talk about cloud versus local hosting. Cloud, it's convenience. You can control the updates. Well, cloud, yeah, it's convenience, updates, cost per tokens, versus local, it's controlled privacy, but you need to invest in hardware. If you're interested on using this for, say, a personal project or your company, just be aware of public web use. Then if you are going into BAAs, there's data use agreements and links here for each of these. I would say majority of people can start with a simple laptop or a computer and just start to run these things locally to understand a little bit more about them. Ultimately, I think a hybrid approach is the best. You don't always need local investment, but you can't just rely on cloud. And again, there's links to information about this if you're interested. If you are going to go locally hosted today, there's 3 things to check out. There's Olama, there's LM Studio, and there's VLLM with Hugging Face. So these are 3 ways that you can run things locally. And they run on pretty much anything. So whether if it's a Raspberry Pi or maybe a Mac Studio or a server, you can modify them to be able to run any of these. This is just very quick guidelines on choosing the hardware if you do want to. There's also a link down here to an LLM calculator I created. Just runs an algorithm. You tell it how big of a model you want to use, and then it'll give you the amount of hardware in both VRAM and in system RAM that you will need for a system like that. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. We ran through the last couple of sections, but I just wanted to be able to give everyone at least some bullet points on, failures, where to go, what to look into, and next things to come along. And this section are my very bold predictions, just like last year's. So bold predictions, we'll have sudden death of standalone chats. I think that's becoming archaic, and now they'll be able to integrate these tools like agents or, for example, data scraping directly from chats. You'll have vast more amount of things. There's going to be an inference cost crisis because there's multiple people now using AI. There's regulations around AI, and we were focused on scaling rather than being efficient. So we are likely to see prices of API costs go up. So another reason why maybe investing into local might be the way to go. I think that majority of people, at least in these AI fields, are going to benefit from enterprise. And that's where everything is heading. At first, they want just to capture the like broad audiences, but we're going to see more and more enterprise licensees, perhaps even tools being taken away from the public view and putting them in enterprise only or extremely high paywalls. I mean, we've already began to see this with $200 subscriptions, monthly subscriptions, right? And those are single for one user. Imagine a team of people. So some exploding use cases, agent data pipelines, that's 100% going to keep increasing. We have more people being concerned about data privacy and also creating your own customizations for your use cases. Code orchestration, I think maybe in like 2 years, you hardly will have to code anything, and you could just rely on connecting systems that are created by AI. Now, those will be very difficult to debug if you have no understanding of code, but I think that's where the world is heading. And I think the next huge step is multimodal world. We think about Gen AI as just a tool to create text, and we saw videos and pictures start to become more integrated around April, May. I think the next step is where we have these LLMs live on robots, and these robots are then able to navigate the world to do common tasks. Now the critical skills to learn in 3 months. So agent orchestration frameworks. So mastering something like LangGraph, AutoGen, or Microsoft semantic kernels for multi-agent workflows. If you want to be involved in agents, it's the way to go. Agent rag patterns, learn how to, again, use MCPs. Reasoning model prompting. So again, prompting stays as one of the core things to know about, because as models become more complex, they can be extremely verbose and go off tangent. You want to be able to guide a model through the process so you don't have to view it or oversee it, because that's not automation. You want to be able to automate things. Lastly, agent evaluation task. So you need to be able to come up with frameworks specifically for your business or personal use cases on what makes a project successful or an action successful on an agent. Industry won't provide this to you because this is likely to be individual instead of a broad leaderboard like the ones we saw. High value skills for the next 6 months, data quality engineering, because we've already ran out of data. So we were going to rely on synthetic data or maybe human generated data to keep on training these models. After the first 3 months is learning about MCP orchestration. Then lastly, cost optimization, because like I said, I think there's going to be an inference crisis because there are so many laws against building more data centers and zoning. We've had an issue here with our own data centers where we're struggling to build another data center for the University of Michigan, even though we have plenty of funding. I would say in a year, we are going to be in a spot where we need to focus more on alignment of agents to make sure they don't overstep, they don't get out of control, and also, again, the multimodal fusion. So understanding those visions, audio, language orchestration, so we could put them into physical robots, navigate the world. These are my bold predictions for 1 year from today. We'll see how they go. But with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. So we have roughly 8 minutes. Like I said, we ran through the last couple of sections. But if anyone has any questions, either on chat or in person, this is the time to ask. Yep.
I was gonna add a plug. I know Kaggle has an upcoming 5-day AI agents intensive course with Google, so just sharing that. But my question was like, what's your bold predictions and just kind of how you've been seeing things in general? Like, do you have a sense of, okay, here's what's happening for like the folks who have those $200 a month kind of packages, the industry stuff. But as far as like the rest of the population, like they're at this stage, like do you have a sense of like how far behind, like the gap between like what's kind of like out there in industry and like the people who are, very up on it versus like the everyday person?
Well, I'll say that I have a couple of friends in different industries. So one in tech industry, they're like tech and finance, they're light years ahead of what I'm doing. They're doing agent orchestration of basically like hundreds of different actions all simultaneously. When it comes to friends in regular industries like automotive and me, I have so I'm a premium Claude user, so I have the $200 license. And once I did that, it increased my output maybe say at least 70%. So I'm able to get a lot more work done in a lot less time. So in my opinion, it is worth the 200 for what I do. It won't be worth it for everyone. People in industry have unlimited use, right? So they can just bill as much as they want. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a specific one. I was just kind of curious, and that was enlightening just to hear like tech and finance are doing things like so much more than necessarily kind of what you were comparing yourself and people in automotive. So, I mean, I wouldn't have like necessarily thought about that. So I was just trying to get a broad idea of.
Yeah, no, specifically tech, I mean, Google's using their AI systems to come up with new materials. They actually came up with two new materials. They came up with, I think, a new mathematical proof for an optimization algorithm. It was a problem that was up for 150 years. And that's when you start to question, well, what are the limits of human intelligence and how can we compare it versus AI intelligence? There's also the case of they basically took Google Gemini on a like extensive research. And I think it did research for 9 months, and it was able to come up with this microbiology solution enough to be publishable. And when they cross-referenced it, someone a couple months before had been working on this problem for 15 years, had just come up with the same solution. Their work was not public, so there's no way there was cross-contamination. And 6, 9 months of research or just letting it think and do research, come up with conclusions versus like 15 years in human years. I think that's why they're so far ahead, right? Imagine all the different tools that they do have. Defense is, I guess, like one very scary sector for AI, but they are also, you know, far beyond your imagination of what you think they could do. And just with this Google example, OpenAI has a lot more of like biological studies and things being published on their blog posts. If you look up, I think they did a new DNA sequencing comparison and other things like that. Do we have any questions on chat?
One, it's similar to what you were just talking about. Is it time for us to rethink about how college curriculum should be, especially in programming language or writing, given these emerging technologies? Like at what point does the current curriculum become irrelevant? And you know what I mean? Like,
I don't want to be bold, but I think it's already irrelevant. Um, I think that the beauty of today is that you have access to so much information. And I wish I had some of these tools when I was in school because I would go on eBay and buy the teacher's edition's book. So I had the answers on the back of the book. So I was able to verify everything that I did. And now you could just have AI tutor you. You could have, you know, basically a partner to learn. Now, when that becomes irrelevant is when you're focused on very technical, low-level things. For example, I had to learn assembly language programming, and I had to learn about, transistors and other things like that. We no longer have to learn about these things. Rather, my elective courses, super high level about system design, system engineering, those things are more relevant than ever. Because that's what you need to now navigate this world. AI is able to do all the low level stuff, all the grunt work, and it's up to you to be able to come up with intelligent designs, to be able to come up with a solution, to make a workflow, or even debug, understand like where something should be happening on a low level so you can identify that's the issue here. Sadly, all those were my electives and not my core classes.
No, that's a good point, though. I mean, the bar of what humans do and what is just things that tools do obviously moves quicker than ever nowadays, right? That's the this of this discussion.
Yeah, and I know there's also the concern about people just becoming lazy. And I think that that's true, you know. You should be able to utilize these tools not to replace your work, but maybe to amplify your work. Doesn't mean that you don't need to learn how to program. It means that you should understand programming from such a high level that you don't need to program. I hope that makes sense. Any other questions or questions online?
No, I don't see any online. Someone posted a link to a Google event of some sort, Google AI Agents Intensive 2025. Someone posted the link there if anyone's interested. I'm sure you can look that up as well. So
Great. Well, thank you for everyone coming today, and maybe I'll see you in a part 3.
In 6 months.
yeah, right.
6 months.
Thanks everybody. Applause. For those online, I'll send out the well, actually, for everybody here, those online, I'll send a link out before you hang up from Zoom for the survey feedback as well. So, and then I'll send out an email with a link to the video and all the resources coming up to your inboxes in the next probably 48 hours. So, be on the lookout for that. And I appreciate you guys' attention and for coming today.